And thank you for staying with us. Start Lighthouse is a not for profit supporting lifelong literacy through a two-generational approach by creating access through customized literacy kits, literacy programming with a racial justice lens, as well as fundamental workshops for families. Joining us to tell a little bit more about this is Executive Director and Co-Founder of Start Lighthouse, Rina Madhani, also co-founder Anya Morales, and also we'll be talking a little bit more about how this impacts our community. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Oh, glad to have you. So give us a little bit of a walkthrough about Start Lighthouse for somebody who just walks in and says, who are they? Explain.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. And just to start, for us, we had been ideating about creating our own literacy initiative since October 2019. And we had spent a lot of time just reflecting on our own personal experiences. Both Anya and I have taught in the South Bronx and have been in the education sector for several years now. And we realized that the biggest barrier to literacy proficiency is access to books. And we realized that is such a pressing matter, and that was something that we actively wanted to be able to address with our organization. So we officially launched Start Lighthouse this past March during the pandemic, which is actually crazy to say out loud, but I think the pandemic almost accelerated our organization further. There was such a great need for the work that we were doing, given the fact that many districts didn't have real contingency plans in place with digital learning and what that was actually supposed to look like. And we realized that what kids genuinely needed were books, given the fact that we had widespread school and library closures. And that's what led to our first initiative, which was creating these customized literacy kits for students in grades K to 8.
You said right around the time the COVID-19 hits, here you go, and you're bringing your organization, full steam ahead. Talk to us about the virtual component and the literacy component and how you guys are able to navigate that.
I think with that, like trying to figure out how to navigate that was realizing how can we bring these books to kids first, because our first aspect was the physical book. So making these lit kits and partnering up with PS Port Morris, our first school, that we were able to create these kits and like make these students get these books. And with those books, we create worksheets that students can do when they're reading this book, and their parents can contribute with and have that conversation, even if they're not familiar with the book. We do it in English and Spanish, so there's not a learning gap with that or a language barrier, and that can assist with what they're already learning. We make sure like if you're getting a kindergarten lit kit, you're getting like florence cards, crayons, you're getting books for that level and guiding questions for that for kindergarten, as well as like if you go to 8th grade, that's our last grade we work with, you're gonna have all that support no matter where your child's at, and you can support them even if you're not familiar with the material. On an online basis, we started doing, we had our racial justice program called Little Woke Activists this summer, a 6-week program that me and Rina are very proud of, that we focused on building foundational literacy skills with the younger students at this point, and we incorporated social justice issues. So we talked about Black Lives Matter, we talked about civil rights movement. We talked about from the very beginning, our first week was identity, like how do we identify and like where our families come from, what does that look like living in the South Bronx? And even with that, it was beautiful to see these students connect in different ways. Like, yeah, I'm Black or I'm Latino, I'm from Bangladesh. Like to see them have these authentic and organic conversations naturally was just like an amazing thing to see. So I think we're able to kind of broaden that gap in that way, not only physically, but online.
And you're coming off of a major event this past weekend. You've also had the Literacy for Community Fair, an opportunity for the community actually to get connected. Talk about that and what that did for the community residents.
Yeah, absolutely. So we as an organization have been able to collect 975 brand new books, which is just been beyond incredible and something that we just hadn't anticipated happening. And in May, actually, we had our first distribution take place within the community through our partnership with PS5 Port Morris. And in May, we had distributed 300 brand new books in the form of our customized literacy kits. Our books, our kits, they went within the hour. And the response was so tremendous. And I remember just reflecting with our team and just thinking, wow, like the fact that like our kids were gone within the hour and families and students were still coming, asking about them throughout the afternoon. And it made me realize personally, like there's so much work to be done and there's so many students that we ultimately want to reach. So over the past few months, we've been able to fundraise. We got an incredibly generous donation from Kobe Yamada and the Compendium team. He's the author of What Do You Do with an Idea? And his team generously donated 500 copies of his book to us. So with that generous donation and our fundraising efforts, we were able to put together a Literacy for All event that took place this past Saturday. Mm-hmm. And for the event, Anya and Brittany and I knew that we wanted to be able to involve organizations within the community, organizations that are doing similar work, and just bring everyone together. So for that event, we were able to partner with Monhaven Community Partnership, Strive Higher New York City, Project Yes, and we also collaborated with ACS, who was already working with the Fire Department of New York City. So all of us were able to come together for this event, and the lines were around the block. Families were waiting. We had an opportunity to just make some connections with students and families and talk about the work that we were doing. And the support and everything was just so tremendous.
Yeah, and when you talk about literacy in the borough of the Bronx, obviously one of the things that we've always talked about on our show is the fact that there seems to be a lack of bookstores and places for people to really be able to go and enhance that. Talk about bridging that gap, because that's a huge gap that we have, and particularly for low-income families. I mean, it really plays a really important role of literacy, well, for anybody per se, but particularly in the area of low-income families, not even having the necessary resources to be able to succeed.
I think that also goes back to just how we look at education. We see education as a privilege when it shouldn't be. Education for everyone. And especially during COVID, where like families can't even go to the library and like get a book. And that's a great resources in the sense of like having those books for children to read. So that's where we come in, trying to build children's libraries and giving them these kits and these worksheets and just any type of information we can provide for these families so they can continue what they're learning in school. Also, we also collect used books, like gently used books, to build up classroom libraries. That's another aspect we're starting to do, just because we want to give access to everyone for these books. Like I remember being an ELA teacher in the South Bronx and like scrambling around to find books and how difficult it was. And I know from that personal experience, like no teacher should have to go through that. No kid should get dirty, dingy books that are old, but we want to give them something. Like every kid deserves a brand new book. Every teacher should have to focus on just teaching and not having to figure out how to make a donors choose, how to do all these other resources, like just because we don't have them in the school. And I think that's where we want to challenge that gap and minimize it, especially in New York City, where our public schools are funded by the neighborhood. So you don't really see this issue on like the Upper East Side or at these other schools that are in wealthier areas. And we want to focus on these like low income areas that have been historically oppressed and make sure we're providing the service to the Bronx and hopefully further along different parts of New York City.
Yeah. Rina, talk to me a little bit about the Lit Kit, because when you talk about providing a service, you know, a Lit Kit is provided to those who are taking part in your program. What's a Lit Kit?
In our literacy kit, you can find 2 culturally responsive and diverse books. And the reason for that is that we acknowledge that the biggest barrier to literacy is access to books, but we also want to be able to provide literature that is relevant to our students and their lives, where they can find characters that they can connect with and empathize with. We also provide bilingual comprehension guides. So those are guides that family members and caregivers can use while they're doing read-alouds with their children to really help foster their comprehension. And as Anya mentioned, we also we have a team of educators that are creating these customized reflective activities that tailor to each book within the literacy kit, so that we really hope that we can foster a love for reading that can truly transcend the walls of the classroom and come into their homes. And we want the discussion around that book to be ongoing, right? So even after you're done reading, you're still thinking about what you just read, and you're having that conversation with your family member, your caregiver, about what happened in the book. And we also provide writing utensils and a pencil case, along with additional resources in terms of phonics cards and sight word flashcards, depending on the age group.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but so much great work that you guys are doing. Continue to do that. We can get people connected to you. I'll tell them in just a few seconds. But Anya, Rina, thank you so much for being with us here on Open.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to have you. Listen, now, if you want more information about them, what do? You can exactly go to their website. The website is startlighthouse.org. And then also you can follow them on Instagram, also on Twitter and I should say Instagram and Facebook at Start Lighthouse, at the Start Lighthouse. All righty. Well, we've got more show. Don't go anywhere. We've got more coming up right after this.